It takes into account records. It takes into account everything. It is the most all-encompassing stat. And every time he drops back, the Browns lose more points than any quarterback since 2000, since True Media started.
I want y'all to hear that now. Every time he drops back, the Browns lose more points since any quarterback in 2000. The Browns ain't had no.
If you thought Cleveland football discourse couldn't get Messier, think again. Because what went down on UCSS was a debate. It wasn't analysis. It was a full-blown exposure. The kind that leaves careers shaking and timelines scrambling to delete clips. 1 minute, Jay and Jason were comfortable, confident, pushing the same tired talking points about Shedeur Sanders. The next, the room shifted. The tone changed, and G. Bush leaned forward. This is Spill News, where secrets don't leak quietly. They explode. The internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. Fans froze mid-scroll. Group chats lit up. Blogs refreshed in real time. Because when G. Bush started laying out receipts, stats, context, contradictions, it stopped sounding like opinion and started feeling like someone had been lying for a long time. So let me ask you this. If you were in that chair, same pressure, same betrayal, same voices trying to rewrite reality, what would you do? Stay quiet or burn the whole narrative down? Because that's exactly what happened next. And trust me, this story doesn't just get ugly, it gets personal. It didn't start with shouting. That's the part people miss. There was no yelling, no wild hand gestures, no chaos. In fact, when the cameras first came up on UCSS that day, everything looked normal. Too normal. Jay and Jason were relaxed, leaning back in their chairs, doing what they've done for years, talking confidently, speaking in absolutes, acting like gatekeepers of football truth. And like always, they were comfortable because they thought they controlled the room. That's how this always begins.
Y'all notice something? Points are being put on the board. Touchdowns are being scored. Shedeur Sanders has played 5 games, and 3 of them each was 20 points or better. Dylan Gabriel played 6 games.
Not with a bomb, with comfort. They'd already decided how the conversation would go before the mics went live. Browns are bad. Quarterback situation is hopeless. And Shedeur Sanders? Convenient scapegoat. A name that gets clicks. A name that triggers fans. A name they've learned they can criticize without pushback. Or at least, that's what they believed. But sitting just a few feet away was someone they didn't plan for. G. Bush wasn't talking. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't jumping in to interrupt. He was sitting there with his hands folded, eyes forward, listening. The kind of stillness that makes loud people uncomfortable if they notice it. But Jay and Jason didn't notice. They were too busy warming up the narrative. It started subtle. Little phrases. You gotta look at the future. You can't ignore the data. This isn't emotional, it's analytical. The usual cover words. And if you watch them long enough, you recognize the pattern. They don't attack outright at first. They circle. They frame. They soften the ground before they strike. Then Jason said it. The Browns have to take a quarterback. Not might, not consider. Have to. That sentence landed heavier than it sounded. Because it wasn't about roster construction. It was about erasing someone. Writing an ending before the chapter finished. And for the first time, the camera caught it. A slight shift in G. Bush's posture. Not anger. Not surprise. Recognition. Jay jumped in immediately, co-signing the take like it was pre-written, talking draft position, talking replacements, talking about Shedeur Sanders as if he were already gone, as if the last few weeks didn't happen, as if the tape didn't exist, as if the scoreboard didn't matter. And still, G. Bush said nothing. That silence, that's where this story actually begins. Because silence, when used correctly, is a weapon. Jason leaned forward. He wanted confirmation, validation. He wanted G. Bush to either agree or explode. Instead, he challenged him. I want to hear why. That's what he said. On paper, it sounded fair. In reality, it was bait. The kind of bait you throw when you think you're holding all the cards. G. Bush finally moved. Not dramatically, not emotionally. He leaned forward just enough of the mic to catch his voice clearly, and he said calmly, "I'm interested in hearing the why." That was it. No insult, no accusation, just an invitation. And that's when Jay and Jason made their first real mistake. They thought the floor was safe. They thought the numbers would protect them. They thought analytics would shield intent. Jason started talking about support systems, offensive line struggles, things everyone already knew, safe criticisms, things that sound fair on the surface. Then he crossed the line. He brought up EPA. He didn't just mention it. He leaned on it, weaponized it, claimed that by this metric, Shedeur Sanders was the worst quarterback this century. Let that sink in. Worse than every bust. Worse than every backup. Worse than names fans don't even remember anymore. And he said it like it was undeniable fact. The studio shifted, not because of volume, because of implication. That wasn't analysis anymore. That was assassination by spreadsheet. Jay nodded along. Silent approval. The kind that says we're aligned. We're covered. And if you were watching closely, you could see it. They thought they'd won. They'd escalated the claim high enough that disagreement would sound emotional, defensive, biased. Still, G. Bush didn't react. Jason doubled down, explained EPA like he was teaching a class. Down and distance, game situation, field position, home versus away. The most all-encompassing stat, he said. The ultimate truth, the end of debate. What he didn't say was more important than what he did. He didn't mention context, timeline, sample size, or the inconvenient fact that EPA as we know it wasn't even being tracked consistently in 2000. But none of that mattered yet, because G. Bush was still letting him talk. And then Jason went further. He questioned Shedeur's intelligence, said he doesn't know what he's seeing, can't flip protections, doesn't understand when pressure is coming, can only throw to wide open receivers, can't make tight window throws, can't throw guys open. Each sentence landed heavier than the last, not because they were true, but because they were definitive. The kind of statements you make when you want to end a conversation, not start one. That's when the tension became visible. Because now, it wasn't just about football, it was about credibility, about whether anyone in that studio was actually watching the games they talked about whether narratives were being built before evidence was examined. G. Bush finally spoke again. This time, not interrupt, to respond. He started slow, methodical, almost gentle, talking about the Bills, the Bears, 2 playoff caliber teams, 11-win teams, talking about backups on the offensive line, missing weapons, circumstances that don't show up neatly in a stat column. Jay tried to pivot. Jason tried to reframe, but it was already too late. The trap they walked into was closing, because now the conversation wasn't hypothetical. It was specific. G. Bush mentioned plays, situations, games, things you only reference if you've actually watched the tape. He pointed out how quickly people dismiss 5 or 6 games as a verdict, how other quarterbacks get patience, development curves, excuses, while Shedeur gets final judgments. And that's when the energy changed completely, because the audience felt it. You could see it in real time, the body language, the pauses, the way Jay stopped nodding, the way Jason started explaining instead of asserting, the shift from confidence to defense. But G. Bush wasn't done building the case. Not yet, because everything up to this point was still groundwork, context, framing. He hadn't even pulled out the receipts. He hadn't touched the scoreboard. He hadn't exposed the moving goalposts. He hadn't asked a question that would hang over the rest of the conversation like a shadow. And just when Jay and Jason thought they could steer it back into safe territory, G. Bush leaned forward again and changed the entire direction of the show with a single observation, one that would force them to explain not just their stats, but their intentions. And that observation didn't come wrapped in outrage. It came wrapped in math. Calm, unavoidable math. G. Bush didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean back. He leaned in, just enough to signal that the tone had shifted from opinion to evidence. He looked straight ahead and said, almost conversationally, that what bothered him wasn't the criticism, it was the inconsistency. Because if we're really going to talk about numbers, then we have to talk about all of them, not just the ones that fit a pre-written conclusion. That's when he brought up the scoreboard, not highlights, not fantasy stats, not cherry-picked throws. Points, actual points, the one thing the entire sport exists to produce. And suddenly, the room felt smaller, because once you introduce the scoreboard, there's nowhere to hide. G. Bush started laying out slowly, almost like he wanted everyone listening at home to follow along with him, game by game, era by era. No rushing, no spin. He went back first. Joe Flacco, veteran presence. Safe hands, as they like to say. Browns versus Bengals, 16 points. Ravens, 17. Packers, 13. Lions, 10. No emotion in his voice, just numbers. Then he moved forward. Dylan Gabriel's stretch. 6 games, some wins, some losses, but again he kept it grounded. 9 points against the Steelers after throwing 60 passes. 31 against Miami, mostly on the ground. A couple games over 20, sure, but nothing dominant, nothing transformative. Then he paused, and when he said Shedeur Sanders' name, the room went quiet in a way microphones can't fully capture, but audiences can feel. Browns versus Raiders, 24 points. Win, Browns versus 49ers, 26. Browns versus Titans, 29. Browns versus Bears, 31. Browns versus Bills, 20. 5 games, 3 over 20 points. The pattern was undeniable. He didn't say it triumphantly. He let the numbers speak. And numbers, when presented without emotion, are devastating. Jay tried to interject. Something about context. Jason leaned back, arms crossed, like posture alone could undo arithmetic. But G. Bush kept going. He asked a question that sounded simple, but carried weight. If the offense is scoring more points with this quarterback under center, why are we pretending that didn't happen? Why are we acting like production only matters when it comes from someone you already like? That's when the phrase landed, the one that instantly clipped across social media. He said the goalposts have been moved so much they should be sponsored by U-Haul. It wasn't just funny, it was accurate, and everyone in the room knew it, because they'd watched it happen in real time. When Shedeur pushed the ball downfield, they said he wasn't playing in structure. When he adjusted and took what defenses gave him underneath, they said it wasn't aggressive enough. When he ran to survive pressure, they said he wasn't a pocket passer. When he stayed in the pocket, they said he lacked mobility. No version of him was ever enough. G. Bush didn't accuse them of bias directly. He didn't have to. He just asked why the standards kept changing. Why other quarterbacks got development windows, while this one got deadlines. Why one rookie's mistakes were framed as learning experiences, while another's were framed as proof of incompetence. Jason went back to EPA, tried to rescue the argument, explain again how it accounts for down and distance, score, time, field position, the whole thing, like repeating it would make it truer. That's when G. Bush calmly dismantled the foundation. He pointed out that EPA as a standardized metric wasn't even widely used until well after 2000. That comparing quarterbacks across eras with a stat that didn't exist in its current form was meaningless. That methodology matters. Context matters. And pretending otherwise is how narratives get laundered as facts. You could feel the shift, not just in the studio, online, because clips were already circulating. Fans were already reacting. Tweets were popping up mid-show. People saying things like, "Wait, he's right," and "Why hasn't anyone said this before?" And buried in the noise were others trying to downplay it, trying to reframe, trying to move the conversation somewhere safer. But G. Bush wasn't finished. He addressed the people in the building line next, the anonymous sources, the vague authority. He asked a question everyone at home was thinking, but no one on the set had dared to ask. Which people? Who exactly? The coaches? The front office? Or just voices being used to give weight to an opinion? and he made it clear if anyone inside the Browns organization truly believed their quarterback couldn't read defenses or flip protections, then that's not a Shedeur problem. That's an organizational failure. Jay shifted in his seat. Bush started referencing plays, actual moments, changing protections at the line, communicating assignments, tight window throws that contradicted the claims being made. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to insult anyone. He just kept adding layers, context on top of context, evidence on top of evidence. He talked about the offensive line, statistically one of the worst in the league, receivers who rank near the bottom in separation, drops on catchable balls, injuries that stripped away options. He didn't use them as excuses. He used them as explanations. The difference matters, because excuses avoid accountability. Explanations demand fair evaluation. Jason tried one last pivot, brought up other quarterbacks, names that had been hyped, names that were supposed to be sure things. Bush didn't flinch. He pointed out games where those same quarterbacks struggled, games where the numbers were pedestrian, games where they were given grace. And he asked why that grace never seemed to extend in one specific direction. That's when the energy in the room changed completely. Not tense anymore, awkward, because once hypocrisy is named, it's hard to unname it. Jay stopped nodding. Jason started clarifying instead of asserting. The power dynamic had flipped. The hunters were now being examined. And as Bush leaned back for the first time since he started talking, you could feel it. The sense that something irreversible had just happened. That this wasn't just a segment anymore. It was a moment, the kind that gets replayed, quoted, remembered, because narratives thrive in silence, and silence had just been broken. But just when it felt like the conversation might wind down, like maybe everyone would agree to disagree and move on, Bush added one more thought, one that reframed the entire debate not as media drama, but as a reflection of something deeper, something about expectations, about names, about who gets patience and who gets pressure. And as he said it, the realization set in that what we were watching wasn't the end of the story. It was a turning point. That turning point didn't come with applause. It came with discomfort, the kind that lingers after the cameras stop rolling, and everyone has to sit with what was just said. Bush didn't celebrate. He didn't smirk. He didn't declare victory. Instead, he did something far more damaging to the old narrative. He zoomed out. He said this wasn't really about one segment, or one show, or even one quarterback. It was about how quickly media decides who's allowed to develop and who isn't. How some players are treated like projects, while others are treated like problems. And how once a label sticks, people will bend numbers, twist context, and invent sources to keep that label alive. That's when it hit Jay and Jason that this wasn't something they could laugh off later. This wasn't a bad clip. This wasn't a soundbite taken out of context. This was a full-body breakdown of how narratives are built and protected. And worse for them, it was happening calmly, methodically, in a way that made it impossible to dismiss as emotion. Bush talked about pressure, not blitzes, public pressure, the kind that comes from carrying a last name that already means something, the kind that makes every mistake louder and every success quieter. He pointed out how Shedeur Sanders doesn't get to be just a rookie. He gets to be a symbol. And symbols don't get patience. They get judgment. That's when the aftermath really began. Because while the studio was still live, the internet had already made its decision. Clips were spreading, not edited maliciously, not chopped up, just straight footage. Fans were saying the same thing over and over. He didn't yell. He didn't insult them. He just cooked them. Others were harsher, calling out Jay and Jason by name, pulling up old takes, old misses, old predictions that age poorly. And once that door opens, it doesn't close easily. Blogs picked it up. Aggregators ran headlines. Comment sections turned into trials. People started asking questions that went beyond Shedeur Sanders. Who else has been judged this way? How many careers have been quietly shaped by narratives that never had an answer for themselves? And most importantly, why did it take this long for someone in that space to say something? Jay tried to regain control, near the end of the segment. He framed it as healthy debate. Jason leaned into clarification mode, saying things were being misinterpreted, taken too far. But the damage was already done, because the audience didn't hear debate. They heard deflection, and once trust cracks, every word after sounds defensive. G. Bush ended his part without a flourish. He didn't demand apologies. He didn't ask for retractions. He simply said that the tape will always tell the truth eventually, and that if you're confident in your analysis, you shouldn't be afraid of context. You shouldn't be afraid of time. You shouldn't be afraid of development. That line didn't trend because it was flashy. It trended because it was true. In the days that followed, the fallout kept growing, not explosively, steadily. Fans started rewatching games, pulling clips, posting side-by-side comparisons, not to crown anyone prematurely, but to question why certain claims were ever made in the first place. People noticed the protection calls, the audibles, the tight throws that supposedly never happened. Silence from Jay and Jason didn't help. Neither did half responses. The longer they waited, the louder the questions got. Because once you claim something that absolute, the burden of proof is on you. And proof doesn't hide well in the age of replays. As for Shedeur Sanders, he didn't say a word. No tweets, no interviews, no subtweets. And that silence did more for his image than any press conference could have. Because while the media debated his ceiling, he kept playing, kept adjusting, kept scoring. The Browns didn't suddenly become perfect, but they were competitive, functional, alive. And that's what made this moment stick. It wasn't about crowning a savior. It was about rejecting a burial, about refusing to let a storyline outrun reality. G. Bush didn't argue that Shedeur was flawless. He argued that he was real, developing, responding, and that in a league obsessed with instant results, that still matters. The final twist wasn't dramatic. No walk-offs, no shouting matches, just a lingering realization that two voices who were used to controlling the narrative had been forced to answer for it. And one voice, by simply refusing to play along, changed the conversation. People will debate this moment for a long time. Some will say G. Bush went too far. Others will say he didn't go far enough. Jay and Jason will keep doing shows. Shedeur will keep playing football. Life will move on. But something shifted. Because now, every time a hot take gets thrown out without context, people will remember this. They'll remember how calm exposure sounds, how receipts feel heavier than volume, how narratives collapse not with explosions, but with questions they can't answer. And somewhere in all of that, the biggest takeaway remains simple. When facts walk into a room full of opinions, the room doesn't stay comfortable for long. The show ended, the cameras cut, the clips lived on, and the secret stayed. And now the question isn't whether that moment happened. The footage is out there. The receipts are out there. The silence afterwards speaks louder than anything that was said on that set. The real question is this: what do you do when narrative you trusted starts falling apart in real time? Because what happened on UCSS wasn't just a sports debate. It was a mirror, a moment where fans were forced to ask themselves who they've been listening to and why. Who benefits when a young quarterback gets buried before he's allowed to grow? Who profits from outrage dressed up as analysis? And how many times have we all watched a story get pushed so hard that it starts sounding like truth? G. Bush didn't raise his voice. He didn't chase clout. He didn't call anyone names. He let facts in the room. And sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can do, because facts don't need defending. They just need space. So now it's on you. Did G. Bush expose a broken media narrative? Or was this just another example of fans hearing what they want to hear? Are Jay and Jason victims of backlash culture? Or did they finally get held accountable for takes that never had an answer for themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not the safe ones. The real ones. And if you're tired of recycled talking points, tired of fake outrage, tired of narratives that collapse the second you add context, hit that subscribe button, because this story isn't over. Not even close. More clips are surfacing. More conversations are coming. And trust me, there are names we haven't even mentioned yet. Stay locked in. because the next exposure might be even louder.